Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're taking a look at the Plague Singer. And this is a end-game centric build. Now I'm not going to say it's a true in-game build because it's not meta. It uses in-game sets and some in-game stuff to play at the in-game level. So I just want to be clear on that and clarify that it is not meta, okay? And this is just something that I created that I thought was really good. It's really fun to play. It's really interesting. So let's go ahead and get into the build, taking a look at what we are. We are the Plague Singer, sorry. We are an Orc Necromancer. We have 64 points in a stamina. That's going to be optimal for this, and the Orc is going to be the better race for this setup, even though other races can play this, like the High Elf, or not the High Elf, the Wood Elf, the Red Guard, the Dark Elf, and pretty much any stamina race can play this build really well. The Magicka races can still play this build, but just remember they're going to be more magic-centric, and it's better to go with more of a hybridized type setup then. Usually like a tri-stat setup, thing like, you know, something more mixed. But it still works. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at stats. We have 12k, almost 13k Magicka. We have 21k health, 31k max stam. We do have a 1337 stam recovery, 585 mag recovery, and a 321 health recovery. We have our weapon damage coming in at 3024 with a 42% weapon crit. That is unbuffed. We have a 1607 spell damage, 19% spell critical, 14k spell resist, almost 14k physical resist. And then moving on down here, we do have the Slayer, Minor Slayer from one of our sets. We do use the Lover Mundustone. You can use the Thief if you want to as well. And then of course Dubious Cameron Throne, or you can use the Artam Takeaway Broth. It's a much better food for this. It's going to give you health and stam recovery plus max stamina and max health. Very much like this, it gives you health recovery as well. And it's just a really good set of food for this. So, moving on now to our equipment and inventory stuff. Potion-wise, you can use tripods for when you're playing like more solo-centric, along with the Longfin Pasty Melon Sauce. This is more solo-centric food. Then when you're playing in a group, Dubious Cameron Throne is really good, along with the Warrior or Stamina Power Pots. These are the ones that give you stamina back, they give you the major endurance, they give you major brutality, major savagery. You're going to want to use those for when you're playing in a group as a damage dealer. Now this is a DPS build, just letting you know. Alright, now going over our sets, starting with our monster set, we are using Veladrits. Veladrits is a really good set for this. A lot of people will say things about it, but don't worry, it's a really good set, especially for the way this build plays. It focuses more in disease and poison damage than anything, so you really want to focus into that. So using this monster set really applies to it. As you can see, it gives you 129 weapon damage on the 1-piece, 2-piece. When you deal damage, you have a 20% chance to spawn 3 disease spores in front of you, and after 1 second they deal X amount of disease damage to the first enemy they hit. This effect can occur once every 9 seconds. That's really good. And then on to the next set, we are using Reliquins. Now this is not perfected Reliquins, this is Reliquins. This drops in the normal difficulty of the trial. The reason I'm not using perfected is because, like I said, this is an in-game centric build. It is not an in-game build. So it is another build that you can use to play to get that better stuff, like the perfected set. So this one on the 2-piece gives you weapon crit, the 3-piece Minor Slayer, the 4-piece weapon crit, and then on the 5-piece, your light and heavy attacks apply a stack of harmful winds to your target for 5 seconds. Harmful Winds deals X amount of physical damage per stack every second, up to 20 stacks. So it stacks damage. So if you get up to the max 20 stacks, this thing does a lot of damage. It does like 5k a tick, and it's pretty powerful. Also, that Minor Slayer plays on every damage ability you use. Alright, moving on to the next set, and this is where things are going to get really interesting. A lot of people are going to question this, but I love this set for this particular build, and that is the Swamp Raiders. Swamp Raiders is a very powerful set. The 2-piece adds weapon crit, 3-piece weapon damage, 4-piece max stamina, and then the 5-piece adds 400 weapon damage to your poison and disease damage abilities. Now remember, most of the abilities you will be using are disease or weapon damage orientated, so you're going to want to focus on that so you get that higher damage output. And being a Necromancer, you can really focus into this. Alright, so now we're going to go over traits and enchants. Starting with the enchants on our helm, chest, and legs, we are using tri-stat enchants, and this is to give us a higher ability to use all 3 stats. For when we're solo playing, you kind of want to be hybridized, so this way you can play into your magicka side, you can play into your stamina side, and you can play into your health side a little bit better, and you have a little bit better mix of stuff, because you will be using magicka based abilities when you solo play. You're not going to be playing with just damage abilities like this build's set up for. Alright, moving on to the legs and chest. Again, we are using the tri-stat, like I said, but we are using infused traits on the chest and legs, and this is to give us higher stat values for those enchants, those tri-stats. It's just a little bit more, but it does play well into our survivability, into our max stats and all that stuff. So we are using the infused on the chest and legs, and then the helm is going to be reinforced. The reason for the reinforced helm, a little bit more in our survivability. Now moving on to the small pieces, we are using max stamina enchants on the small pieces, all of them, along with Divine's traits. The Divine's traits are going to give you a much better addition from your Munda Stones, so you're going to be able to play off your Munda Stone a little bit more. Now a lot of people are going to point out that with the tri-stats, or with the you're going to have lower penetration and stuff. Don't stress it, guys. You're still going to be pushing your DPS really high, okay? Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, let's go over the traits and enchants on our jewelry, starting with the 2 rings. We are using 2 Trirune rings with weapon damage enchants. These 2 Trirune rings give you greater control of your character when you're in solo play, but also when you're playing in a group, you can take advantage of having that higher magicka pool if you need to, you know, like, need an extra orb, or you need something magicka based that your character uses. You can actually utilize it because of this. So, and the 2 weapon damage enchants just maximize your weapon damage. The next piece of jewelry is going to be Bloodthirsty with a Stam Recovery. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, why are you using Stam Recovery? I'm one of those people, I like to build for resource management, no matter what. So I always put a Stam Recovery on my jewelry if I'm not using a set piece that gives me Stam Recovery. So that's why I'm using this in particular. And it's the Bloodthirsty really adds to your DPS when you get the enemy below 25%. And like I said, this isn't a true meta setup or a true in-game setup. This is something to help you get into, you know, play at in-game levels and keep your character at a survivable, well resource managed everything. This is just an overall like, hey, you can play this build and still be good at in-game, and it'll carry you through in-game because you have the health, the magicka, the stamina, you have the recovery, you have all this other stuff that your character needs until you become a better player. Moving on to the weapons, we are using 2 Swamp Raider weapons on the front bar. We are using an axe and a dagger. The axe will add a bleed every once in a while from your light attacks, which is nice. It's not consistent, but it is really nice. And we are using an absorb stamina here for the purpose of that. And I think I don't have my weapon enchant set up because knowing me, I probably forgot this one thing. So I'm going to go ahead and grab 2 things here, and we are going to grab that and a poison. So let me check something. Yeah, I thought so. So we're going to go ahead and enchant the axe with a poison enchant. The reason for the poison enchant is just so you can apply a little bit more poison damage. and that's going to help you out. We are using sharpened here, so you are going to get some extra physical and spell penetration. And then on the next one, we are using an absorb stamina Nirnhone dagger. Now you can go Nirnhone axe with a sharpened dagger. It doesn't matter how you have this combination set up. This is how I prefer it. So I like to use a Nirnhone offhand, but that physical damage from the absorbed stamina will restore a little bit of stamina every so often, and it's nice in the sustainability side. Moving on to the back bar, we are going to be using a weapon and spell damage enchant. This is going to maximize our damage when we're on the back, from our back bar to our front bar. We are using an infused enchant here, and like I said, that's just to maximize our DPS, so it's really good. And that is our gear setup. Now we're going to go take a look at skills, starting with the skills we have on our bar. On our front bar, and you don't have to use this setup on your front bar, you can use whatever setup you like. I like this setup, it works out really well. We have rending slashes. This is our primary, one of our primary dot abilities. This thing's going to deal physical damage, it's going to deal physical damage over time. It also reduces movement speed, and it does a lot of damage. The next ability we use is Blighted Blast Bones. This thing will charge up, send out a skeleton that explodes, dealing disease damage to all enemies in an area, and apply Major Defile. Then we have our Venom Skull. This is going to be our primary spammable. Every time you fire one of these, on the third cast, it will deal 20% increased damage. And then while slotted, casting Necromancer abilities while in combat will count towards the third cast. So by the time you cast this ability for the second time, it will be at its full charge, because it's going to get the 3 casts on it. The next one we have is called Detonating Siphon. Now this will draw basically a line between you and the enemy, and it'll deal disease damage over 12 seconds between you and that enemy and that line. And then if the siphon lasts the whole time, it'll explode, dealing X amount of damage to all enemies around it. While slotted, you deal 3% more damage. Then we have Deadly Cloak. This is here mainly because it procs damage every 5 seconds. Or it'll proc damage to enemies every second within 5 meters for the duration of 8 seconds. It also gives you major evasion, reducing your damage taken from area attacks by 25%. Next ability we have is called Flawless Dawnbreaker, and this is here primarily because it's a great source of damage over time and a cone in front of you. So this will deal X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 6 seconds, but while active, for the next 20 seconds you will get 300 more weapon damage. So this is just really good for trash fights. Moving on to the back bar, our first ability is Barbed Trap. Now this will set a trap that takes so long to activate and all that, but once it triggers, it will deal X amount of damage to a target. It will deal X amount of damage over 18 seconds, all 30k in total, and it gets Minor Force, increasing your critical damage by 10% for the duration. Enemies who activate the trap are immobilized for 2 seconds if they can be immobilized. Next ability we have is Poison Injection. This deals damage up front, it deals damage over 10 seconds. It's a very powerful ability, and it's a really nice one. Also, the damage over time deals up to 100% more damage if enemies are under 50% health. It's kind of like a minor execute. Next ability we have is Unnerving Boneyard. Now you don't have to use this ability because it does very little damage, but it does apply Major Breach and Fracture to multiple targets. Another ability you can put here is Razor Caltrops if you want to. This way you can keep that Major Fracture at least applied, but this does apply Breach and Fracture. And then if there's a corpse in the area, it will actually consume that corpse and present 50% more damage to the enemies when they take damage. Next ability we have is Endless Hail. This is here because it just does a lot of damage over time. It's just really good. Next ability, of course, is Skeletal Archer, and this one you summon a skeleton for 16 seconds, and every 2 seconds it will deal physical damage to enemies, and each time the archer deals damage, its next attack will deal 5% more damage than the previous attack. And then last but not least, our Super Ultimate. This is the one you're going to primarily use in boss encounters. You summon a flesh colossus that pulverizes the enemy. It smashes them 3 times over 3 seconds, dealing X amount of damage each time, and it grows in power. And each smash applies major vulnerability to the enemy for 3 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 30%, and it reapplies every hit. So for every second that it's smashing the ground, it's giving you 3 seconds. So it actually gives you a total of 5 seconds in length. So it's really nice. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, I'm going to go over the skills I do have unlocked. So for the Gravelord, the ultimate, of course, Pestilence Colossus, then we have Venomous Skull, Blighted Blast Bones, Unnerving Boneyard, Skeletal Archer, and Detonating Siphon. We also unlock all the passives here. On the Bone Tyrant, we will unlock Ravenous Goliath. It's really good for when you're solo playing. Then we have Ruinous Scythe, we have our Beckoning Armor, we have Necrotic Potency, Agony Totem, Empowering Grasp, and then moving on to the passives here, we do have them all unlocked. And then Living Death, we have the Renewing Animation, Blood Sacrifice. It's a great heal for yourself if you're solo playing. Expunge and Modify, Enduring Undeath. This is really good if you're playing in groups and you want to get some extra healing on them. I primarily use this if I would be using Tri-Stat Food and I want to play more of like a group support character. I would use something like that. Intensive Mender is a really good one to have in your group, and then also Mortal Coil if you want to have a heal instead of the Detonating Siphon. And this will give you stamina back. And you can, again, a lot of this stuff is dependent on your group setup, what skills you'll use and stuff like that. Passive abilities unlocked. Moving on to weapons, we do use Dual Wield as our primary. We have Thrive in Chaos. This is a great ability if you want to swap it out for the Dawnbreaker. It's a really cheap ultimate. Not quite as good as this, but it's a cheap ultimate and it's easy to get off. Next ability is Bloodthirsty. This is really good if you want a spammable that heals you. And you can also swap around a few of your abilities, like I will put the Venom Skull on the back bar and put Bloodthirsty on the front bar. Then we have Rending Slashes, Steel Tornado, great AoE DPS ability if you want to put that on the front bar, Deadly Cloak, and then Shrouded Daggers. And then we do have all the passives unlocked. Bow, starting with the ultimate, we do have Toxic Barrage, we have Lethal Arrow, Endless Hail, Draining Shot, Acid Spray, and Poison Injection, along with all the passives. Moving on to armor, light armor passives, we have the top 3. Medium armor, we're going to take all of them, and you can take the evasion and whatever one fits best for you. Heavy armor, the top 3, and then into world skills, Soul Magic, Soul Shatter, or Shatter Soul. I really like this ability for an ultimate, and then Consuming Trap's really good too. You can use this for a dot if you want to. And then we have Soul Shatter, Soul Summons, and Soul Lock. Moving on to Fighter's Guild, I do unlock all the passives here. Ultimate ability, Flawless Dawnbreaker, active ability, Silver Shards, Ring of Preservation, Evil Hunter, and Barb Trap. Mage's Guild, Shooting Star, Inner Light, Structured Entropy, Scalding Ruin, and Balance, and then I unlock the passives as well. The reason for this is if I'm going to play more of a support character, like a healer or something in a group, I can do that, and it's mainly for when I'm playing in normal dungeons or I'm playing in some veteran base game dungeons. I can play a healer really well with this build still. Cedric Order, Temporal Guard, really good for PvP. Time Freeze is another good one you can use if you want to add some more CCs to your character. Crushing Weapon is another good single target damage ability, and it will help you get a shield. Race Against Time is another way to get the Minor Force. Symbiosis is a good heal for when you're in group play. Again, there's a lot of abilities I swap around for when I play different roles. Introspection, really good for when I'm like tanking. And then of course you do want to get the passives here. I always forget these because the top ability is always unlocked, so, or passive. Undaunted, Sanguine Altar is really good for group play when you're playing support. Shadow Silk is a really good damage over time ability, and you can swap this out. I would do this with like something like Unnerving Boneyard. This would give you another poison damage ability, and that poison damage is also going to be boosted because of your monster set, or your one set, the Swamp Raiders. Then we have Enter Beast for if we want a tank. We also have Spike Bone Shield if we want a tank. And then we have Mystic Orb for giving resources. Spike Bone Shield you don't have to use just for tanking. You can also use it for solo play. And then, of course, you want to get the passives to the Undaunted. Alliance side, I do unlock Aggressive Horn, Resolving Vigor, and Razor Caltrops. And then on the support side, Ultimate, Reviving Barrier, Efficient Purge, Stalwart Guard, and Magic Aid. Excuse me. Of course, we are an Orc, so we get Brawny, which increases max stamina by 2,000. We get Unflinching Rage, which increases our max health. And then whenever we deal damage with the weapon ability, we heal for 660 health. And that can happen every 4 seconds. And then we have Swift Warrior. Increases your weapon damage by 258, and it reduces your sprint cost by 12%, and increases your movement speed bonus of sprint by 10%. Moving on to Alchemy. Medicinal use, very important. Get it over the long term. And then Gourmand and Connoisseur, also very important to get over long term. Now I'm going to go over the CP, or the champion levels, and I do have this set up, guys, for more of a broader spectrum, more of a solo play setup, but there is a lot of different setups you can use. Nephis has a great guide for CP setups for different things. I think he has it on his website, and he has a video out for it. You can also, just watch like Asian God or Outcast. They also have setups for CP that you can use if you don't want to use these for endgame. Alright, so I put 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 20 in a medium armor focus. This increases physical resistance by 1900 while wearing 5 pieces of medium armor. We do have 18 in a spell shield. This is going to increase your spell resistance. Moving on over here, we have 43 into Hardy. This increases or reduces damage taken from physical poison and disease damage by 10%. We have 43 in Elemental Defender, reducing Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. 31 into Thick Skin, reducing damage over time effects by 13%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases effectiveness of damage shields you apply by 16%. Yeah. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing healing received by 5%. And then moving on over to the Green Tree, we have 40 into Warlord. This reduces break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 75 into Mooncap. This increases stamina recovery by 14%. And I do have 43 into Arcanist, increase my mag recovery by 10%. Because, like I said, if I play support, I want mag recovery, so I will switch some things around on my character sometimes so I can get that higher mag recovery. Moving on, we have 40 into Tumbling. This reduces dodge roll cost by 16%. We have 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing block cost by 16%. And then moving on to the Blue Tree, we have 43 into Bless. This increases our healing done by 10%. This is our own healing we cast ourselves and healing others cast on us. Or, not others, any healing we cast out, period, from ourselves will get it boosted by 10%. This is whether single target heal on ourselves or an AoE heal for our group. That's what I meant to say. Moving on, we have 35 in the Physical Weapon Expert. This increases the light and heavy attack of our dual wield and bow weapons by 20%. And then we have 40 in the Mastered Arms. This increases our damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Moving on, we have 56 in the Mighty. This increases physical poison disease damage by 12%. We have 56 into Precise Strikes. This increases critical damage and critical healing by 20%. And then 40 in the Thaumaturge. This increases our damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, I'm pretty sure you guys want to see what these build looks like in action. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick parse on this one. And this is pretty much going to show you what your damage would look like in like a normal group, or a normal dungeon, or a veteran dungeon on bosses. So let's go ahead and drink our potion. We're going to go ahead and drop our trap, go through the whole thing here of our DPS stuff. And as you can see, we did about 31k DPS. It's not too bad. That's actually pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a parse on this big guy over here, and this is going to show what your damage would look like in an actual raid type group if you were in a truly organized raid group. Now, you're never going to be in a perfect raid group, so don't expect the damage to this to reflect your true damage. Just use it as an example to represent what your damage can look like in a perfect situation. So again, potion, and then of course we're going to go through the whole process here. Oh, I forgot to do that one. But as you can see, we're doing about almost 50k DPS. And you can get better. I mean, you can get probably 55k with this setup if you can pull off the rotation better. But that's pretty much what it looks like when you're doing DPS. I'll go ahead and show you guys what this looks like when we come out of combat here in a second. All the bonuses and everything. And you guys can see for yourselves what this thing looks like. So roughly, like I said, about 50k DPS, and that's consistent damage. You can keep that rotation up all the time, which is nice. So let's go ahead and take a look at our stuff here from the chart. So we go up to about 5k weapon damage with a 58% weapon critical, 95% spell or weapon or critical damage, 6k penetration roughly most of the time. But if you guys look here at our different stuff, we had like 20,000 from the death bolt. Barb trapped was dealing about 13,000. Endless hail, poison injection, venom skull was hitting for 38k, and this is on the big skeleton when we were getting the really high damage. And our pestilence colossus was dealing just a insane amount of damage, and this is because of that 400 extra weapon damage we get from the Swamp Raiders. So this is a really powerful setup. So that 4,800 weapon damage on most of our poison damage stuff and disease damage stuff, which is half of our abilities, you got to remember, we're getting an extra 400 weapon damage. So we are getting over 5k weapon damage on poison disease stuff. And then this other stuff is doing a little bit more. So it's actually doing pretty decent amount of damage with all these different things, and it's pretty crazy when it gets up there in damage. Then moving back to the previous encounter, this is when we are fighting that's the first one. This is when we are fighting the minor skeleton guy, and as you can see, we get to about 4k weapon damage, 52% critical, 80% critical damage, and 11k penetration. And then of course the damage we do is nowhere comparable to what we would if we were in a perfected raid group. So, but that's pretty much it for the Plague Singer, guys. I hope you guys liked the build. It's a fun DPS build, like I said. It's not too hard to get to put together. You do have to run Cloud Rest Trial on normal mode, and it's pretty easy to run, and you just get the gear and upgrade it. And Swamp Raiders drops in Shadowfen area, so it drops in an overland area. It's really easy to get as well. You can get the jewelry pretty quickly and the weapons and stuff from world bosses, public dungeons, and you can get the jewelry from chests or from the anchors, the dark anchors. So really easy stuff to get. And then Veladrith drops in Cradle of Shadows veteran mode. It's not too difficult to do if you have a good group. But that's pretty much it for the build, guys. Hope you guys like it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.